My name is Catherine Reynolds, and at 34, I built a tech company worth $50 million from nothing but an idea and sheer determination. Then one night, my father raised his glass, smiled that smile I knew too well, and announced to Jason, the new CEO of SecureSync. My own brother, who'd contributed nothing, was stealing my life's work with my father's blessing. The room spun as I realized the depth of their betrayal. What they never expected. I walked away with every patent, client relationship, and key executive. If you think that was the end of my story, you couldn't be more wrong. Before I tell you how I turned this betrayal into my greatest triumph, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe to join me on this journey of revenge, served professionally cold. Growing up in Seattle's affluent Bellevue neighborhood, I learned early that achievements came with an asterisk in the Reynolds household. My father, William Reynolds, built his commercial real estate empire through ruthless determination and an unwavering belief that men belonged in the corner office. My mother, Margaret, once a promising accountant, had long ago surrendered her career ambitions to become the perfect corporate wife. Then there was my brother Jason, 2 years my junior, but light years ahead in our father's estimation. Baseball trophies for participation earned more praise than my academic awards. "That's nice, Catherine," became the refrain whenever I shared accomplishments, quickly followed by, "Did you see Jason's new project?" My fascination with technology began at 16 when I built my first computer from salvaged parts. Dad walked past my bedroom door, glancing at the circuit boards and wires spread across my desk. "Interesting hobby," he muttered. That same evening, he spent dinner raving about Jason making junior varsity football despite his mediocre athletic abilities. "He's got leadership qualities," Dad proclaimed. "Natural charisma. That's what you can't teach." By 17, I was coding simple programs while maintaining a perfect GPA. My guidance counselor suggested applying to MIT, her eyes bright with enthusiasm as she reviewed my credentials. "MIT is expensive," my father countered when I brought home the application. "State school would be perfectly adequate for your skills." Yet when Jason struggled to maintain AC average, private tutors appeared overnight. When acceptance letters arrived, Dad somehow found the money for Boston College for Jason, while I pieced together scholarships for MIT. "Your brother needs the connections," Mom explained gently. "You'll be fine anywhere with your technical abilities." At MIT, I thrived among people who valued innovation over gender. My roommate Allison became the first person who truly saw my potential, staying up late discussing emerging technologies and market gaps. "You don't just understand systems," she told me during finals week of sophomore year. "You see how they could be better." I graduated summa cum laude with dual degrees in computer science and business. Jason scraped through with a general business degree after 6 years and 2 academic probations. At my graduation dinner, Dad raised his glass. To Catherine, always the studious one. Then, with genuine pride lighting his eyes, and to Jason's new position at Wilmot Construction. Vice President of Business Development at 24. Now that's impressive. The position, I later learned, materialized through Dad's golf club connections and came with a salary that made my entry-level tech consulting job look like pocket change. For 3 years, I worked at Prism Technologies, quickly advancing through the ranks. Each promotion came with late nights and innovative solutions that saved clients millions. Meanwhile, Jason cycled through departments at Wilmot, each lateral move explained away as broadening his experience base. During a major security implementation for a banking client, I identified a critical vulnerability in how data transfers were secured across platforms. The existing solutions were clunky, requiring massive bandwidth and still leaving exposure points. For weeks, I worked after hours developing a more elegant approach. "This is revolutionary," my manager Ryan said, reviewing my prototype. "But corporate wants to stick with the established vendors." That night, I called Allison, now working at a venture capital firm in San Francisco. "The problem is real, And my solution works, I explained, pacing my apartment. But no one's listening. Maybe they're not the ones who need to hear it, she replied. Have you considered going independent? Building the solution yourself? Dad scoffed when I mentioned leaving Prism to start my own company. Catherine, security tech is dominated by established players with massive resources. This isn't like opening a coffee shop. I'm not opening a coffee shop, I countered. I've identified a market gap with a solution that could revolutionize how data security works. He sighed, that familiar sound of disappointment. Startups fail at what, 90%? Take the safe route. Prism is giving you a steady paycheck. I don't want steady. I want exceptional. That's the problem with your generation. Everyone thinks they're exceptional. He shook his head. At least Jason understands the value of institutional knowledge. He's working his way up properly. Jason, who was now on his third role at Wilmot after his previous departments mysteriously reorganized, nodded sagely. It's about paying dues, sis. I looked between them. My father, who built his company from nothing, now preaching caution, and my brother, who had never taken a real risk, pontificating about dues, and made my decision. 2 weeks later, I submitted my resignation to Prism Technologies. The journey that would lead to both my greatest success and most painful betrayal had officially begun. The day after leaving Prism Technologies, reality hit hard. My savings would cover 6 months of expenses if I lived frugally. I converted my second bedroom into an office, setting up a whiteboard wall to map out my security platform architecture. I named it SecureSync, a system that would synchronize security protocols across disparate platforms without the usual performance degradation. My first investor meeting was with Brunswick Capital, where the managing partner glanced at my prototype demonstration before checking his watch repeatedly. Interesting concept, but you have no business experience, he concluded. And security is a crowded space with established players. The next 5 meetings followed the same pattern, patronizing smiles, technical questions that proved they didn't understand the innovation, then polite rejections. As a last resort, I approached my father. We met at his favorite steakhouse, where I presented a meticulously prepared business plan and financial projections. It's solid, he acknowledged, surprising me. My heart lifted momentarily before he continued, but I don't invest in startups. Too risky. Why not pitch this to your current employer? Let them take the risk while you get a nice bonus. Because it would be their intellectual property, not mine, I explained. I believe in this enough to bet my career on it. He signaled for the check. That's your choice. Just don't come asking for a job when this doesn't work out. With my runway shrinking, I attended a Women in Tech networking event more out of desperation than hope. That's where I met Linda Harris, a former security software executive who had recently cashed out after her company's acquisition. Unlike previous investors, Linda asked penetrating questions about the technical architecture. She requested a demonstration, then another with specific test parameters she designed on the spot. You've solved the latency problem that's plagued cross-platform security for years, she said finally. How much do you need to build a minimum viable product and land your first client? Linda's $300,000 investment came with intensive mentoring and introductions to her industry contacts. More valuable than the money was her belief in me, the first time someone with real influence had looked at my work and seen its true potential. With funding secured, I needed a technical team. Marcus Wells, a brilliant security architect I'd worked with at Prism, was my first call. You're asking me to leave a secure position to join a startup with no clients and 1 round of funding, he clarified over coffee. Yes, but I'm also offering you chief technology officer position and equity stake in something that could transform the industry. He studied me for a long moment. Send me the technical specifications. I'll review them tonight. The next morning, he called. I'm in. 2 weeks' notice enough. With Marcus handling the technical architecture, I focused on building our core product and securing our first clients. We worked from my apartment, with Marcus coding from my living room sofa and whiteboards covering every available wall surface. Sleep became a luxury as we refined the platform. I subsisted on ramen, coffee, and the occasional pizza when we coded through the night. Every penny went into development and patent applications for our core technologies. Our breakthrough came 3 months later when a small credit union agreed to implement SecureSync as a pilot program. Their existing security solution was failing compliance requirements, and larger vendors were quoting implementation timelines of 6 months or more. "We can have you compliant in 3 weeks," I promised, knowing this would require around-the-clock work. "If you can deliver that, you've got a deal," their CIO said. For 21 days, Marcus and I virtually lived at the credit union, integrating our system and refining it based on their specific needs. When their compliance audit came, they passed with flying colors, with the auditors specifically noting the innovative security architecture. That single success led to 3 more financial institutions signing on within months. Each implementation refined our product and expanded our use cases. I filed patents on each innovative component, building a substantial intellectual property portfolio that would later prove invaluable. With growing client demand, we needed to expand. I hired Rachel Donovan as our operations director and James Wilson as lead security engineer. Our team of 4 soon outgrew my apartment, forcing us to lease a small office space in a converted warehouse. Linda introduced us to Vertex Ventures, whose partner was impressed enough by our growing client list and technical innovations to lead a $2 million funding round. The investment valued SecureSync at $5 million barely a year after founding. The night after signing the funding documents, my phone rang. It was my father. "I saw the announcement about your funding round," he said, his tone uncharacteristically impressed. $5 million valuation? Not bad, Catherine. My heart shouldn't have leapt at this meager praise, but old habits die hard. Thanks, Dad. You know, with this kind of growth, you should consider bringing in more experienced management. I know several executives who might be interested in guiding a young company like yours. And just like that, the moment was gone. Even my success needed his improvement. "We're doing fine with our current team," I replied. "But I appreciate the offer. Just trying to help." "Don't get defensive," he said. "You've got a good start, but scaling a company requires experience you don't have yet." I ended the call shortly after, returning to the office where my small but dedicated team was celebrating with cheap champagne in plastic cups. Looking at their faces, people who believed in my vision enough to bet their careers on it, I found the validation my father had never given me. We were small, underfunded, and facing enormous competitors, but we had built something valuable from nothing but an idea and determination. The journey ahead would be even harder, but for the first time, I truly believed we could succeed, with or without my father's approval. SecureSync's growth accelerated beyond even our optimistic projections. By our 18th month, we had expanded to 23 employees and moved to proper offices in downtown Seattle. Our client list included 17 financial institutions and 3 healthcare providers, all drawn by our system's superior performance and significantly faster implementation time. Our company culture evolved organically around core values of innovation, integrity, and inclusion. Unlike the rigid hierarchies I'd experienced elsewhere, we built a meritocracy where the best ideas won regardless of title. Weekly innovation sessions became legendary for producing breakthrough solutions to stubborn problems. Marcus proved invaluable not just technically, but as a leader who could translate my vision into actionable engineering roadmaps. Rachel built an operations framework that allowed us to scale rapidly without compromising quality. We added Diana Fletcher as Chief Financial Officer, whose previous experience with tech startups brought needed financial discipline. Our executive team bonded through late nights and shared challenges, becoming more like family than colleagues. We celebrated wins together and collaborated through setbacks, developing the kind of loyalty that can't be bought with compensation packages. Industry recognition came when SecureSync won Most Innovative Security Solution at the annual TechSEC conference. Standing on stage accepting the award, I scanned the audience and spotted several executives from companies that had rejected my initial pitches now taking notes during my acceptance speech. The publicity attracted attention from larger clients and investors. Blackstone Ventures led our Series B funding round, investing $15 million at a $25 million valuation. The infusion allowed us to expand our engineering team and accelerate our product roadmap, particularly into artificial intelligence applications for threat detection. My father called the day after the funding announcement. "Congratulations are in order," he said. $25 million. That's legitimate business territory now. Thanks, Dad. We're growing fast and have some major new clients in the pipeline. I've been telling people my daughter's the founder, he said, pride finally creeping into his voice. The Reynolds entrepreneurial spirit clearly runs in the family. It was the validation I'd sought for years, yet it felt hollow coming so late. Still, when he asked to tour our offices, I agreed. The day of his visit, I proudly showed him around our space, introducing him to key team members and demonstrating our latest security innovations. He nodded appreciatively, asking surprisingly insightful questions about our growth strategy. As we finished the tour in my office, he dropped the real reason for his visit. "Jason's been let go from Wilmot." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, genuinely surprised. "What happened?" "Politics," my father waved dismissively. "The CEO's nephew wanted his division." "You know how these things go." I didn't know. What I also knew was that politics was rarely the whole story. "He's been exploring options, but the market's tight right now," Dad continued. "I was thinking perhaps you could find a position for him here. Something in business development, perhaps." The request shouldn't have shocked me, yet it did. "Dad, we hire based on specific skills and experience." "What does Jason know about cybersecurity?" "He knows business. Relationships. Things you technologists sometimes overlook," he replied. "Besides, he's family. Families support each other." The irony of this statement from a man who had consistently favored my brother while dismissing my achievements wasn't lost on me. Still, refusing outright would create a family rift I wasn't prepared to handle. "I can meet with him," I conceded. "But I make no promises. He would have to interview like anyone else." Jason arrived for his interview wearing an expensive suit and his practice charm. His resume showed 5 positions in 8 years, each described with inflated titles and vague accomplishments. "I could really help elevate SecureSync's brand presence," he explained, using buzzwords that suggested minimal understanding of our industry. "Create synergistic partnerships with key players in adjacent verticals." Against my better judgment and the concerned looks from my executive team, I created a role, Director of Strategic Partnerships. The position came with clear metrics and a 6-month probationary period, standard for all employees. I emphasized to both Jason and my father. Jason's early weeks showed promise. He was personable and clients seemed to enjoy his easy conversation style. But it soon became apparent he expected different treatment. He missed deadlines, skipped internal meetings, and took extended lunches with potential clients that produced no tangible results. More troubling was his behavior at family gatherings, where he positioned himself as instrumental to SecureSync's success. "We just landed Meridian Bank," he told my parents over dinner, 3 months after joining. My connections from Wilmot really opened that door. The truth was that our engineering team had spent months cultivating Meridian, demonstrating our superior security architecture to their technical staff long before Jason joined. When I confronted him privately, he seemed genuinely confused. "I'm just promoting the company. Isn't that my job?" "Promoting with accuracy is your job," I corrected. "Our team deserves proper credit for their work." As SecureSync continued growing, my father became increasingly involved, calling weekly for updates and offering unsolicited advice. More concerning were his casual mentions of meeting board members for lunch or golf, meetings I hadn't been informed about. Meanwhile, Jason's performance issues continued. Rachel brought documented concerns about missed deadlines and misinformation provided to clients. Marcus reported that Jason had attempted to commit us to technical capabilities we hadn't yet developed. He needs more structure and supervision, I concluded during his performance review, and clear boundaries about what he can promise clients. Jason nodded contritely, but later that week, I overheard him on the phone with our father, Catherine's being impossible, micromanaging everything I do, doesn't understand the business side. I should have acted then, but family complications clouded my professional judgment, a mistake that would soon cost me dearly. By our third year, SecureSync reached a $50 million valuation with over 70 employees and a client list that included major banks and healthcare systems. We were preparing for a potential IPO within 18 months, working with investment bankers to position the company for maximum valuation. With this milestone approaching, my father suggested a family dinner to celebrate Catherine's success. His emphasis on my name should have alerted me, but I was riding the high of our recent achievements and allowed myself to believe he was finally acknowledging my accomplishments without qualification. I had no idea I was walking into the perfect ambush, one that would force me to choose between my company and my dignity. The Cascade Grill was my father's preferred venue for important occasions, a wood-paneled steakhouse where Seattle's business elite negotiated deals over aged bourbon and porterhouse steaks. Dad had reserved the private dining room, suggesting this truly was meant to be a special celebration. I arrived to find my parents already seated with Jason, all three dressed formally. My father stood to greet me with unusual warmth, pulling out my chair with a flourish. "The woman of the hour," he announced, signaling the waiter. "Champagne for the table. We're celebrating tonight." Throughout the appetizers, Dad was uncharacteristically attentive, asking detailed questions about our recent client acquisitions and technology innovations. He nodded appreciatively at my answers, even jotting notes on his phone. "I've been watching how you've built this company," he said, refilling my champagne. "Very impressive strategy. The Reynolds business instinct clearly runs strong." Mom smiled encouragingly while Jason maintained an odd half-smile, checking his watch periodically as though waiting for something. "We should toast," Dad announced as the main courses arrived. To SecureSync reaching $50 million in valuation. A remarkable achievement. We clinked glasses, and I allowed myself a moment of pure satisfaction. Finally, after years of dismissal and doubt, my father was publicly acknowledging my success on my own terms. And, he continued, his voice shifting to what I recognized as his boardroom tone, to the company's exciting next chapter. Something in his phrasing sent warning signals through my brain. "I've been thinking about the future," he continued. "About what SecureSync needs to reach the next level, 100 million, IPO, and beyond. We have a solid roadmap," I said cautiously. "Our banking partners are confident in our trajectory." "Banking partners are important," Dad agreed. "But leadership is everything. As the company grows, different skills become essential." The waiter cleared our plates, and Dad signaled for another round of drinks before continuing. "After considerable thought and discussions with key stakeholders, I believe SecureSync needs to evolve its executive structure." He straightened his tie, a gesture I'd seen precede major pronouncements throughout my childhood. "Which is why I'm pleased to announce that Jason will be stepping in as Chief Executive Officer, effective next month." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "Excuse me." "It makes perfect sense," Dad continued smoothly. "You're brilliant with product and innovation, Catherine. No one disputes that. But Jason brings the business acumen and leadership presence needed for an IPO track company." Jason's rehearsed speech began immediately. "I'm honored by the confidence the board has shown in me. I want to assure you, Catherine, that your role as Chief Technology Officer will remain secure. Your technical contributions are valued." "My role," I repeated, struggling to process what was happening. "The board?" What board conversations have been happening without my knowledge? Now, Catherine, my father's tone shifted to one of paternal condescension. Several board members and I have been discussing this transition for months. As majority shareholders, we feel this structure best serves the company's future. I'm the founder and CEO. I built this company from nothing, I said, my voice steady despite the shock. Jason has been with us less than a year in a role he's barely managing. That's unnecessarily harsh, Mom interjected, finding her voice at precisely the wrong moment. Jason has been networking extensively with important industry figures. Networking isn't building a company, I countered. And since when do board decisions happen over golf and whiskey without the CEO's knowledge? The investors I brought in understand business succession, Dad replied. They recognize that companies reaching this size benefit from professional management. It's nothing personal. Nothing personal? I laughed incredulously. You're staging a coup against your daughter in favor of your son, who has contributed virtually nothing to this company's success, and claiming it's not personal? Jason shifted uncomfortably. This hostility is exactly why the board feels a transition would be beneficial. Tech companies need steady leadership approaching IPO, not emotional reactions. I turned to him, seeing clearly for the first time the calculation behind his practiced charm. When exactly did you and Dad start planning this? Was taking the job at SecureSync part of the strategy from the beginning? Catherine, you're overreacting. Dad cut in. This is a natural evolution. The board simply feels that as we approach IPO territory, SecureSync needs a certain type of leadership presence. A male leadership presence, you mean? I stated flatly. Don't make this about gender, he dismissed. This is about qualifications and presence. Jason has an MBA. He understands corporate governance, from which he nearly flunked out. I reminded him. While I built a $50 million company from nothing, Dad's patience visibly thinned. The decision has essentially been made. The formal vote is next week, but I've already secured the necessary support. You can fight this and create a messy transition that hurts the company's valuation, or you can accept the new structure and continue contributing in a role better suited to your skills. The true scope of the betrayal crystallized in that moment. This wasn't a spontaneous idea, but a calculated plan executed over months. My own father had been undermining me with the board he had helped me assemble, all while Jason positioned himself for a role he hadn't earned. And if I don't accept this generous demotion in the company I founded? I asked. Dad's expression hardened. Then the board vote might extend beyond just the CEO position. Think carefully about forcing that confrontation, Catherine. The threat was unmistakable. Accept Jason as CEO or potentially lose my position entirely through my father's machinations. I placed my napkin on the table and stood. This dinner is over. Catherine, don't be dramatic, Mom pleaded. We're just trying to help the company succeed. No, you're trying to give Jason something he didn't earn, as you've done his entire life, I replied. But this time, you've underestimated what you're taking and from whom. My father's expression shifted to one I rarely saw, uncertainty. What exactly does that mean? It means congratulations are in order, I said, gathering my purse. Jason, you may become CEO of SecureSync. But I guarantee it won't be the company you think you're getting. I walked out of the restaurant into the cool Seattle evening, my mind already calculating angles and options. They thought they were executing a simple transfer of power, trading on family obligation to smooth the transition. They had no idea what was coming. I drove home in a fog of betrayal and rage, barely registering the familiar streets of my neighborhood. Inside my apartment, I poured a glass of wine with shaking hands and tried to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed incessantly, texts and calls from my parents and Jason that I ignored. Instead, I called the one person who would understand both the business and personal dimensions of this betrayal. Linda? It's Catherine. I need your advice. My father and brother just ambushed me with plans to install Jason as CEO. Linda Harris, my first investor and mentor, listened without interruption as I recounted the dinner confrontation. When I finished, she was silent for several moments. "First, take a breath," she finally said. "Emotional decisions now will hurt you later. Second, call Sarah Parker first thing tomorrow." Sarah was SecureSync's attorney, a sharp-minded corporate lawyer who had structured our complex intellectual property protections. "You think this is a legal issue?" I asked. "I think you need to understand exactly where you stand legally before making any moves," Linda replied. "What your father's attempting is both a business coup and a family betrayal. Respond to the business aspect professionally, then deal with the family aspect personally." I barely slept that night, alternating between fury and strategic planning. By morning, I had the outline of a response, but needed to understand my options. Sarah Parker met me at her office at 7 a.m., listening with deepening concern as I explained the situation. "Let's review the company structure and your agreements," she said, pulling up documents on her computer. For the next hour, we dissected SecureSync's legal foundation. The news was mixed. As founder, I owned 30% of the company. My father had helped bring in investors who collectively controlled 40%. The remaining 30% was distributed among employees and smaller investors. If my father had indeed secured the board majority as he claimed, they could legally replace me as CEO. However, Sarah noted, studying a particular document, the company bylaws you established have some interesting provisions regarding intellectual property. She pointed to a clause I had insisted on when founding the company. Any intellectual property created by founding employees that wasn't directly financed by company funds remained personally assigned to the creator, with the company receiving licensing rights. "You developed the core architecture before funding, correct?" Sarah confirmed. "Yes, and several key patents were filed under my name personally, with licensing granted to SecureSync," I replied. "And these client contracts," she continued, "reviewing our major accounts, many have personal service provisions requiring your direct involvement." A glimmer of hope appeared. "So legally, they can make Jason CEO of SecureSync," Sarah concluded. "But they can't force you to transfer your personal patents, and several major clients have contractual relationships with you specifically that would be challenging to transfer without your cooperation." Over the next 3 weeks, I executed a carefully orchestrated plan. Outwardly, I maintained a professional demeanor at the office, focusing on client relationships and ongoing projects. I attended executive meetings with Jason and my father, offering no resistance to the transition discussions. Meanwhile, I documented everything: my contributions, the development history of our key technologies, and the specifics of client relationships I had personally cultivated. Each night, I reviewed contracts and technical documentation, identifying leverage points and vulnerabilities. I met privately with Marcus, our CTO, sharing the situation fully. "They can't do this," he said, outraged on my behalf. "Without your innovations, there is no company." "Legally, they can," I corrected him. "The question is what remains of the company afterward." "What are you planning?" he asked. "I'm considering my options," I replied carefully. "But I wanted you to hear this from me directly, not through company rumors." Marcus studied me for a moment. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you. Your vision is why I joined SecureSync. Not your father's. Not Jason's." Similar conversations followed with Rachel and Diana. Each expressed shock at the boardroom manipulation and affirmed their loyalty to the company's founding vision, my vision. 2 weeks before the scheduled board vote, I met with our top 5 clients under the guise of routine relationship maintenance. In each meeting, I subtly highlighted the personal service provisions in their contracts and my direct involvement in their security architecture. "I'm committed to your success regardless of any organizational changes at SecureSync," I assured them, planting seeds without making explicit statements about my potential departure. The night before the board meeting, my father called. "Catherine, this silent treatment is childish. The transition is happening. Fighting it only damages the company." "I'm not fighting anything," I replied calmly. I'm preparing for tomorrow's meeting like the professional you claim I'm not. Good, he said, sounding relieved. Jason has been working on his acceptance speech. This can be a positive change for everyone if you'll just accept it. I've accepted many things from you over the years, Dad, I said. This will be the last. He sighed. More dramatics. We'll see you tomorrow at 9. I spent that final night reviewing my documentation and strategy. Everything was in place. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I felt strangely calm. Whatever happened tomorrow would not be what my father and brother expected. For the first time since that fateful dinner, I slept soundly, ready for what would come. I arrived at SecureSync headquarters at 7:30, 2 hours before the scheduled board meeting. The early hour ensured the office was nearly empty as I set the final pieces of my plan in motion. Marcus, Rachel, and Diana arrived by 8, gathering in my office with solemn expressions that matched the gravity of the day ahead. Everything is prepared, Diana confirmed, handing me a folder of financial documents. All accounts and transactions are fully documented and above reproach. Rachel nodded. The team communications are ready to go out on your signal. Everyone who needs to know will be informed simultaneously. Marcus placed a flash drive on my desk. Complete technical documentation of all systems, with clear delineation between company-owned and personally licensed technologies. I took a deep breath, looking at these executives who had become far more than colleagues. Once we do this, there's no going back. Your careers and reputations will be tied to this decision. I would understand if any of you chose to remain with SecureSync. There is no SecureSync without you, Marcus stated firmly. Just a shell with a familiar name. By 8:45, board members began arriving for the 9 o'clock meeting. My father entered with Jason, both wearing nearly identical Navy suits. Dad nodded curtly in my direction while Jason affected an expression of professional sympathy that made my skin crawl. At precisely 9, we gathered in the boardroom. 7 board members, including my father, Jason, and myself, seated around a polished conference table with the SecureSync logo emblazoned at its center. The board chairman, Walter Pennington, called the meeting to order. We have one primary agenda item today, the proposed executive leadership transition. William Reynolds has motioned to appoint Jason Reynolds as Chief Executive Officer, with Catherine Reynolds transitioning to Chief Technology Officer. Do I have a second for this motion? Edwin Marsh, one of my father's golfing partners and a major investor, raised his hand. Second. Before we vote, I interjected, I'd like to address the board. My father frowned, but Walter nodded. The floor is yours, Catherine. I stood, distributing folders to each board member. What you're receiving is a comprehensive overview of SecureSync's current situation and the implications of the proposed leadership change. Opening the folder, I began my presentation. SecureSync's value proposition and competitive advantage rest on 3 pillars: our proprietary technology, our client relationships, and our executive team expertise. Methodically, I walked through the legal reality of our company's structure, highlighting the key patents that remained under my personal ownership with licensing agreements to SecureSync. These 7 core patents, including our adaptive encryption algorithm and cross-platform security protocol, are my personal intellectual property, as documented in our founding agreements, I explained, pointing to the relevant sections. They are licensed to SecureSync under specific conditions that include my direct involvement in the company. My father's expression darkened as he flipped through the documents. This is a technicality that can be addressed in the transition, he attempted. Actually, it cannot, I countered, nodding to Sarah Parker, who had joined us for this portion of the meeting. As company counsel can confirm, these patents remain my property regardless of my position or employment status. Sarah nodded. The licensing agreements are contingent on Catherine's involvement as specified. They cannot be unilaterally transferred or maintained without her consent. I continued to the next section. Regarding client relationships, our top 5 clients, representing 60% of current revenue, have contracts with personal service provisions requiring my direct involvement. Jason leaned forward. Clients contract with companies, not individuals. This is standard business practice. Not in high-security implementations, I corrected. These clients specifically contracted for my expertise and oversight. Page 12 shows the relevant contract language from each agreement. The board members examined the contracts with growing concern as I moved to my final point. Lastly, executive retention. I've asked our executive team to join us briefly. On cue, Marcus, Rachel, and Diana entered the boardroom, standing behind my chair in a visual display of unity. In the event this board votes to proceed with the proposed leadership change, these executives have indicated they will exercise their resignation options, I stated calmly. Their employment agreements, which you approved, include change of control clauses allowing their departure with full retention of their equity positions. The room fell silent as the full implications became clear. Walter Pennington removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. To summarize, I continued into the silence. The proposed leadership change would result in a company without its core intellectual property, without its top-tier client relationships, and without its key executive talent. The shell that remains would be worth a fraction of SecureSync's current $50 million valuation. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is blackmail. This is business, I corrected. You taught me that companies are valued based on their assets, revenue streams, and leadership. I'm simply clarifying what assets would remain after your proposed transition. We can contest the patent arrangements, Edwin Marsh suggested. Sarah Parker shook her head. You could try, but the agreements are quite clear and were executed with proper legal counsel. Litigation would be lengthy, expensive, and likely unsuccessful, during which time the company's market position would deteriorate rapidly. Jason, looking increasingly panicked, turned to our father. You said this was handled. That the transition was straightforward. It should have been, my father snapped before addressing the board. We need to recess and consider options. Before we do, I interjected, I should inform you that I am tendering my resignation as CEO and employee of SecureSync, effective immediately, regardless of today's vote. I placed my resignation letter on the table. My decision is final. The only question before this board is whether SecureSync will continue with some form of licensing and transition agreement with me and my new venture, or whether you prefer a clean break that would necessitate rebuilding the company's technological foundation from scratch. Walter Pennington looked shell-shocked. New venture? You're starting a competing company. I'm founding a company that reflects my original vision for secure enterprise solutions, I clarified. Competition is inevitable in business, as my father often reminds me. My father stood abruptly. This meeting is adjourned while we consult legal counsel. Of course, I agreed, gathering my materials. Marcus, Rachel, Diana, and I have prepared comprehensive transition documentation for either scenario. We'll be available for the remainder of the day for any questions. As we exited the boardroom, leaving the stunned board members behind, Rachel whispered, that went exactly as expected. Phase 1 did, I corrected. Now comes the fallout. The fallout began within hours. Word spread rapidly throughout the company as employees received the carefully crafted email I had prepared, explaining my departure and the founding of Phoenix Innovation. By noon, my phone was flooded with messages from employees asking about opportunities at the new venture. The market reaction was equally swift. An industry blog broke the news by early afternoon. SecureSync founder Catherine Reynolds exits amid leadership dispute. By close of business, industry analysts were speculating about the company's future without its visionary founder. My father made multiple attempts to contact me throughout the day, his messages evolving from angry accusations to grudging negotiation offers. Jason's single text message read simply, "You've destroyed everything. I hope you're satisfied." I didn't respond to either of them, focusing instead on the immediate logistics of launching Phoenix Innovation. The secured office space I had quietly arranged weeks earlier became our temporary headquarters, with essential equipment delivered by evening. Within 48 hours, 17 key SecureSync employees had resigned to join Phoenix, including our entire core engineering team. By the end of the week, 3 of our 5 major clients had terminated their SecureSync contracts, citing the personal service provisions and expressed interest in working with Phoenix. SecureSync's valuation plummeted as news of the mass exodus spread. Industry publications that had once celebrated the company's innovations now questioned its viability without its founding team and intellectual property. 10 days after my departure, my father finally cornered me outside my new office building. "You've destroyed a $50 million company out of spite," he accused, his face haggard from sleepless nights. "I built a $50 million company from nothing," I corrected. "Then walked away when you tried to hand it to someone who didn't earn it. Everything that's happened since was the natural consequence of your actions, not mine. The board is considering legal action," he threatened. "They're welcome to try. Our counsel is fully prepared." I checked my watch. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a company to build." Again. As I walked away, he called after me, "Jason was right about you. Too emotional for business." I turned back briefly. If recognizing my worth and refusing to be manipulated makes me emotional, then yes, I am. But I'm also the founder of a rapidly growing security company with an innovative product line, loyal team, and expanding client base. What exactly is Jason now? The question hung in the air as I entered the building, leaving my father standing alone on the sidewalk, much as he had left me to build my first company without his support or belief. The symmetry felt appropriate. 6 months after the dramatic exit from SecureSync, Phoenix Innovation occupied the entire 10th floor of a gleaming office tower in downtown Seattle. Our team had grown to 42 employees, including 30 former SecureSync staff who had followed me to the new venture. The Phoenix logo, a stylized bird rising above digital flames, represented both our origin story and our mission, emerging stronger from adversity to create something more powerful and enduring than before. Our core products built upon my original security architecture with significant enhancements, benefiting from the freedom to pursue innovation without board constraints. The patents I had maintained personal ownership of provided the foundation, while new innovations expanded our technological lead over competitors, including the hollowed-out shell that SecureSync had become. Marcus had taken on an expanded role as Chief Technology Officer and partner, bringing extraordinary technical leadership that complemented my vision. Rachel's operational excellence created systems that allowed us to scale rapidly without the typical growing pains of fast-expanding startups. Diana's financial stewardship ensured we maintained profitability even during aggressive growth. 4 of SecureSync's 5 major clients had transitioned to Phoenix, bringing their substantial contracts and industry credibility. More importantly, they brought testimonials about why they followed a founder rather than staying with an established company name. We contracted with Catherine Reynolds, not a corporate entity, the CIO of Meridian Bank explained in a case study that became powerful marketing material. Her understanding of our security needs and ability to translate that into innovative solutions is irreplaceable. Meanwhile, SecureSync floundered. Without its founding team, core intellectual property, or major clients, the company's valuation had collapsed to less than $10 million. Jason struggled visibly as CEO, making desperate public statements about rebuilding and new directions that failed to convince industry observers. My father's attempt to save the situation through litigation proved futile. Our meticulous documentation and Sarah Parker's careful legal work ensured that all our actions were defensible and appropriate. After 3 months of posturing, SecureSync dropped their lawsuit, tacitly acknowledging they had no viable legal challenge. The personal cost of the breakup was significant. My relationship with my family fractured along predictable lines. My father and Jason maintained that I had betrayed the family by stealing company assets, while my mother made tearful pleas for reconciliation without acknowledging the underlying issues. For the first time in my life, I established firm boundaries with my family. I declined holiday gatherings and redirected conversations when they tried to discuss business matters. Instead, I focused on building a chosen family among friends and colleagues who valued me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. Therapy became an essential tool for processing the complex emotions of familial betrayal. My therapist, Dr. Hoffman, helped me recognize patterns of seeking validation from people unable to provide it. Your father's approval was never forthcoming because it wasn't about your achievements, she explained during one particularly insightful session. It was about maintaining the family dynamic he was comfortable with. That perspective helped me stop measuring my success by my father's acknowledgement. Instead, I found validation in building something meaningful on my terms, leading with integrity and creating opportunities for talented people who shared my vision. 18 months after founding Phoenix, we secured a major investment from Elevation Partners at a $100 million valuation, double what SecureSync had achieved at its peak. The investment made headlines in the technology press, with several articles explicitly contrasting Phoenix's meteoric rise with SecureSync's continued struggles. The day after the funding announcement, I received an unexpected visitor at our offices. My mother arrived unannounced, looking smaller and more hesitant than I remembered. "This is quite impressive," she said, glancing around our reception area with its wall of industry awards and client testimonials. "You've done well for yourself." "Thank you," I replied, keeping my tone professional but not cold. "Would you like to see the rest of the office?" As we toured the space, my mother grew increasingly quiet, taking in the energy of the collaborative environment and the obvious respect employees showed when I introduced her. In my office, she finally addressed what had brought her there. "Your father is considering selling what's left of SecureSync. Jason hasn't been able to turn things around." I nodded, unsurprised. "I've heard rumors about acquisition talks." "William won't admit it, but he knows he made a terrible mistake," she continued. "His pride won't let him say it directly." "I don't need his admission," I said honestly. "I've made peace with what happened." "Have you?" she asked. "Made peace with it?" The question deserved consideration. "I've accepted that Dad and Jason will never see their actions as wrong or hurtful. I've accepted that I'll never get the validation from them that I once sought. And I've built a life and company that doesn't require their approval. So yes, I've made peace with it." My mother looked down at her hands. I should have intervened. I saw what was happening over the years, how William favored Jason regardless of your achievements. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. It was the closest thing to an apology I expected to receive. "We all made choices, Mom. I'm focusing on making better ones moving forward." As she left, she paused at the door. "I'm proud of you, Catherine." I should have said that more often. The words came decades too late to fill the hole they were meant for, but I appreciated the effort they represented. 2 years after founding Phoenix, our company had established itself as an industry leader with a valuation approaching $200 million. SecureSync had been acquired by a larger competitor for a fraction of its former value, primarily for its remaining client relationships and brand recognition. Jason had moved on to another executive role secured through my father's connections, while my father had officially retired from business activities. One afternoon, as I reviewed quarterly projections with our executive team, my assistant interrupted with an urgent message. "Your father is in reception. He insists on seeing you." I exchanged glances with Marcus, who raised an eyebrow. "We can finish this later if needed." After a moment's consideration, I nodded. "Send him in." My father entered, looking noticeably older than when I'd last seen him. He surveyed the executive boardroom with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seattle's skyline before his eyes settled on me. "Impressive," he acknowledged. "You've built something substantial here." Thank you, I replied, maintaining professional courtesy. What brings you by, Dad? He gestured toward the conference room door. Could we speak privately? After my team exited, leaving us alone in the boardroom, my father took a seat across from me. I received an offer for the family business yesterday, he began, referring to his original real estate company. Significant money, more than I ever thought it would be worth. I nodded, unsure where this was leading. It got me thinking about legacy, he continued. About what I've built and what remains when I'm gone. He paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. I was wrong about SecureSync. The admission hung in the air between us. I thought I was helping, he continued, bringing in professional management, as I saw it. I didn't recognize that you were the professional management the company needed. By the time I understood what you had built, I'd already set Jason up to take over. And saving face was more important than doing right by the company. Or by me, I added. He didn't deny it. Pride is a costly indulgence in business. You taught me that, ironically. What do you want, Dad? I asked directly. Forgiveness? Reconciliation? A relationship with the daughter whose company you tried to take. I don't know, he admitted with rare honesty. I know I've lost something valuable through my own actions. More valuable than SecureSync's market cap. His acknowledgement was something I'd once desperately wanted but no longer needed. My validation now came from within and from the community I'd built around me. I can't go back to being the daughter who sought your approval at any cost, I told him. That person doesn't exist anymore. I understand that, he nodded. I suppose I'm asking if there's room for me to know the person you've become instead. It wasn't a perfect apology, but from my father, it represented significant movement. That would depend on your ability to see me as I am, not as who you think I should be. I'd like to try, he said simply. Our relationship would never be fully healed. Too much had happened. Too many patterns were too deeply established. But over the following months, we established a different kind of connection. Not the close father-daughter bond that might have been under different circumstances, but a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation or expectation. Phoenix Innovation continued its upward trajectory, eventually reaching unicorn status with a $1 billion valuation before I led the company through a successful IPO. The Phoenix Rising narrative proved irresistible to the financial press, with my journey from betrayal to triumphant return becoming a case study taught in business schools. The most meaningful outcome, however, wasn't measured in market capitalization or media coverage. It was the culture we built at Phoenix, one that valued innovation, integrity, and individual contribution regardless of background or pedigree. It was the mentorship program I established for young women in technology, ensuring they received the guidance and support I had lacked early in my career. And it was the personal growth that emerged from confronting betrayal and choosing resilience over resentment. I learned that true success isn't measured by others' recognition, but by building something that reflects your values and creates positive impact. The company I built twice, first as SecureSync, then as Phoenix, taught me that sometimes losing everything you've worked for becomes the foundation for building something even better. The betrayal that could have broken me instead freed me from seeking external validation, allowing me to lead authentically and create the impact I'd always envisioned. As I stand now at Phoenix's headquarters, watching our team collaborate on innovations that will shape the future of digital security, I realize that my father inadvertently gave me a profound gift. By trying to take what I had built, he forced me to recognize my true value and the power of my own vision, lessons that continue to guide me as both an entrepreneur and a human being. Have you ever faced betrayal that ultimately led to something better? Drop your experiences in the comments below. Each setback contains the seeds of future growth if we're brave enough to plant them. If you found value in my story, please hit the like button, subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience, and share with someone who might need inspiration during their own challenging times. Thank you for joining me on this path from betrayal to triumph. Remember, sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings.